One of my staple exercises, and to me one of the most important movements in the weight room that applies to sport, is the Romanian deadlift, which for short is the RDL. The hip extensors of the body are the hamstrings, glutes, lower back. These huge muscles are the ones that are responsible for driving force production and power production in most of the activities that we see in sports. So everything from sprinting, which is single leg, to jumping vertically, where we get hip extension, jumping linearly in front of us like a broad jump. Even lateral, when we turn on that hip, we still get hip extension, which is obviously we see in baseball quite a bit. So before we ever get to any kind of rotational power or single leg power production, we're going to go through that two-legged or bilateral power production using the RDL. It's very important to understand that the RDL, the Romanian deadlift, is one of not only the most important exercises in the weight room, but it's also one of the most difficult to learn. But luckily, there are a lot of progressions that can really help us move into doing the RDL effectively, and there are a lot of there's a lot of feedback that we can get, more so intrinsically, or feedback that we can feel ourselves as the athlete that can tell us if we're doing the movement the right way or the wrong way. One of the most important things to note is that the RDL is not a squat in any way. So when I say the cues, soft knees, we want to go ahead and slightly bend those knees to about maybe 10 to 15 degrees, but throughout the entire movement, we're actually not going to bend or extend the knees anymore from this position. We're going to move solely from the hips. We're going to actually push those hips back, push that butt back towards the wall behind me, go as far as we can while maintaining a neutral spine, and then come back up. So the movement should look just like this. So a great way to start and begin your progression into the RDL is to put the athlete up against the wall completely. So we go heels, butt, upper back, and head up against the wall. Feet should be right underneath the hips. A good way to see if you're in the right position is to go ahead and jump 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Wherever you jump or land from is your power position. And that's, since the RDL is a movement where we're producing power, that's where we want to be. We're going to go ahead and take about maybe a 2-inch step off the wall. From there, feet straight ahead, unlike the squat. We're not going to turn them out, we're going to point them straight ahead. Soft knees, so slightly bend them at that 10 to 15 degree range. From there, we're going to try to push our butt back towards the wall. Big key, don't want to lean up against the wall and put our weight against it. We just want to softly tap the wall, come back up. Not going to feel like they're doing a whole lot, but that's okay, because the next step is to now take another 1 to 2 inches off the wall of a step. Again, soft knees, 10 to 15 degrees. Gonna keep those shoulders back, relax our arms. You'll push our hips back towards the wall, try to get a tap. Come back up. Finally, we're gonna tell them, let's go another 1/2 inch off the wall. Do not want a big step here. Feet right underneath the hips, soft knees. You're gonna take those hips, push them back towards the wall. When we get that weight shift, we should start to feel that stretch in our hamstrings if we haven't already. Come back up. Back down, push the hips back towards the wall, get a tap, feel a stretch in the hamstrings, come back up, do it a 3rd time. That stretch in the hamstrings is one of those intrinsic feedbacks that I was talking about. If the athlete is feeling the stretch in the hamstrings, we know we're probably on track to doing the RDL the correct way, which is a hip hinge. What you might often see is a bent knee as they come down even farther. In that bent knee position, now it resembles more of a squat, which we've already gone over, but also the athlete's gonna know, even if they don't have the coach around them, that if they're not feeling the hamstring stretch, they're actually not hip hinging, which is right here, they're squatting. We don't want those hips to travel down, we want those hips to travel back. A second common mistake you might see with the RDL is actually more movement from the lumbar spine or the lower back in the movement as opposed to from the hips. So the athlete will be in a great position with the knees, soft knees, as they travel down, or as they travel and descend into the movement. Their hips might travel a little bit, their knees will stay locked where they need to be, but all of a sudden you'll start to see lower back or even upper back as well reaching. They try to reach for the floor and then come back up. Not only will they probably feel the lower back in this movement, especially if they add load on top of this dysfunction, but at the same token, they're also not going to feel the hamstring stretch either. So one final bit of advice for the RDL is to tell the athlete to not strive towards getting depth in this movement. We're not necessarily concerned about how far down they go, especially initially. We just want safe ranges of motion. So again, we talk about getting that hamstring stretch, not using the lower back, not squatting because we want it to be effective, efficient, and safe. Just tell them, soft knees, push those hips back. We're just gonna go down until we get a nice good hamstring stretch that we can tolerate, and then we're gonna pull back through. Over time, we can gradually increase the range of motion, but the problem is a lot of times athletes, when they try to increase the range of motion on the RDL or the single leg RDL, they then tend to start reaching for the floor in whatever way they can when they meet that hamstring, that resistance in that stretch of the hamstring, instead of thinking, okay, I gotta keep pushing my hips back farther in order to get deeper into the movement. So just stressing, don't need to touch the floor, don't need to go deep in this movement, just need to push those hips back, get a stretch, and then come back to the top. If you don't have a PVC pipe or a broomstick or anything like that, you can go ahead and actually just use plates. This is fairly light loading here, about 20 pounds. Some athletes, you might just want to put 5s in their hand. Anything to simulate some weight in their hands so that they actually know what to do with their hands. Because oftentimes, not only are we trying to load this movement to try to progress them, but at the same time, the athlete sometimes doesn't know what to do with their hands when they're doing it body weight. They'll put it at their sides, they'll bend their elbows. We want to kind of try to simulate having the bar in their hands and teach them how to track the bar down their body and up against their body as they do this movement. So again, they'll start feet right underneath the hips, soft knees, 10 to 15 degree bend. We're gonna have the weights right in front of the thighs, pull those shoulders back, soft knees and push the hips back. The weight is going to track down the body. It'll separate at the knees from the body, then we'll pull the hips back through.